Well, good morning, and thank you for coming to this little webinar that's power-packed on NLP and spiritual healing. Hi. Oh my goodness, I've got somebody up here again. I don't know how I set this up so we wouldn't see anybody else, but it seems that we have it here, so I'm going to stop the video. There we go. Hi, it's nice to see you here. We have somebody else. We're going to keep the videos off if that's okay with you, as well as muting yourselves. It should have happened automatically, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, welcome to this little webinar, and thank you so much, each of you, for being here. It makes me really happy to see you. Well, I can't really see you, but I know you're there. Okay. So anyway, if your spiritual path that you are on is asking you to discipline or quiet your mind, discipline your emotions, somehow evolve your personality, and develop the knack for transcending all of those things, then you've come to the right place today. I'm doing this because I have so many both students and clients who are wanting, as a part of what they come to coaching for, is helping to infuse their daily life with their spiritual understandings. So from having worked with a lot of people, I understand that we all make a very basic mistake here. And that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about today. I've also brought in a PowerPoint so that you don't have to look at me the entire time this time. I've got a little PowerPoint presentation that I'll go to in a few minutes, and we'll take a look at that as well. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box, and I'll either answer them when you put them in or at the end of the 30 minutes when we close out the actual presentation. So here's the thing. I have a client that I'm going to be talking about throughout this 30 minutes who was having a great deal of trouble balancing her professional life and her personal life. And in all honesty, her spiritual life is the one that was causing her the most difficulty, because she felt really guilty and frustrated about her inability to balance these two. So I'm going to reference, her name was Judith, and I'm going to reference her a little bit throughout this presentation here today. So the thing is once we set out on the spiritual path, part of what happens is that we set up something that makes it difficult for us. We start to be against being a certain way and for being a certain way, and that creates a great conflict. So I'm going to address that specifically here today, because rather than fighting your mind and your emotions, there is another way, and that's what I said I was going to share with you today in this short webinar. So instead of fighting your mind, which means trying to still it so it doesn't speak to you, trying to turn off your emotions so you don't feel them so much and they're not in the way of you behaving in a mindful, present way to the here and now, it causes a great deal of fight to go on the inside. And that's what I want to address here today, because there's a better way. And the better way is to make your mind your friend. Now, even though it's your enemy, and if you're on a spiritual path, I'm sure you've gotten the notion that your mind is the problem here, which is true. I'm certainly not disputing that. The mind and emotions have been in control forever and a day. And the minute that you decide you're going to start exploring the spiritual life, the spiritual path, what happens is that the mind doesn't like it very much, and it tries to interrupt even more than it did before you found a spiritual path oftentimes. So the key here is to change your relationship to the mind. Instead of fighting with it, the more efficient and effective way is to make friends with it, to befriend your mind. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit here today. And to understand that in order to do that, you want to, I'm sure you've heard the old phrase about keep your friends close, but bring your enemies even closer. So there is some wisdom in that in relationship to what we're talking about here today. So there is another way, And what I want to do is talk a little bit about how we get started on all of this and how NLP can be of help in changing this perspective that we have in relationship to the mind. The enemy, still it, don't let it talk to you, don't let the emotions grab your attention, all of which is true, by the way. You do want to still your mind, and you do want to be able to move beyond your emotions and the coloring that they give to your perceptions of things. However, we're talking about a different way to accomplish that goal, all right? And that is to befriend your mind. So let me, if I can figure this out here today, go over to the PowerPoint presentation here and see if I can manage to share my screen with you. It looks like I can. That's good. All right. So let's see if I can get this to work. Come on, change. I can't get it to go. So maybe I can't do this. You know, these technical things that, oops, now what happened? Don't you love it? I really don't know why this was working a little. There we go. All right. What do NLP and spiritual healing have in common? So NLP has to do with the mind and the emotions. That we are all clear about. Spirituality has to do with something greater than the mind. So let's take a closer look at that. Is there any connection between NLP, which, by the way, stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming? That's the relationship between your brain, your language, and your programming or your behavior, and spiritual healing. Well, NLP is great at bridging the gap between problems and their solutions. Spirituality offers a taste of what lies on the other side of the gap between being human and being divine. And this is kind of what the issue has become for most people. When you get on a spiritual path, you're challenged with this new perspective that you are both a human being and a divine being. And if you are like me, that is such a conundrum that I, of course, went looking in all kinds of places, mystical readings, spiritual paths of all kinds of things, until I was like lying on the floor, exhausted on weight of so many different sets of directions for how to accomplish being both a human being and a divine being. Very interesting. In a way, I hope you didn't end up like me, but if you did, you're going to find this very useful. Because here's the deal. When you start looking at being both human and divine, you get some confusing guidelines. And I've identified 3 sets of these confusing guidelines, which is at the root of the stress that we all feel when we are attempting to transform our everyday lives into a more spiritually infused way of moving. So we get guidelines. The human self's guideline is to keep moving and go after what you want. If you've studied manifestation at all, you know that this is what you're supposed to do. Keep moving and go after what you want. The divine self, however, says, stay still and be grateful for what is. Well, this is a heavy piece of the puzzle to be carrying around because these 2 things are completely contradictory and you cannot do both at the same time. You can't keep moving and stay still. You can't go after what you want and be grateful for what is. At least, and here's the problem, that is what your mind will tell you, right? Because as far as the mind is concerned, this is absolutely contradictory, and you are caught between a rock and a hard place here. I'm sure you understand that. And this is actually what my student Judith was going through. She kept following the directives of the human self to get her career off the ground, where her divine self was telling her to stop, rest, and be grateful for what is. The second set of confusing guidelines, human self says, focus on the future and expect to get what you want. Of course, that's the manifestation stance. And in our culture, if you stand still, then you are not going for what you want in our culture. The divine self, however, says focus on the present and let things be as they are. Well, if you're stuck like this little guy is and you're trying to make something happen, right, and you just focus on the present and let things be as they are, then you're probably not going to find the place where that little blue block actually will fit and slide in easily and comfortably. So once again, we have a confusing and paradoxical perspective that stops people cold in their tracks because they have to choose one or the other according to the input of the mind. So we have two sets of confusing guidelines. And here's the third set. The human self guides us to heal our wounds from the past, while the divine self says, you are perfect as you are. If you're perfect as you are, you don't need to heal your wounds from the past. Maybe they're not even real wounds. Who knows? The point is, the mind will see these as completely contradictory and something that you will be unable to perform at the same time. You can't do both, according to the mind. All right, there we go. So it is harder to reach these goals if your goal is to get rid of the mind or the emotions. It can look like clarity, but in actuality, the mind is putting you inside this little jar and you can't get out, all right? Because you can't get rid of the mind or the emotions. As long as you're here, you're going to have to deal with those. So we're talking about a different way of relating to those two things. So it's easier to reach these contradictory goals, both the human and the divine, if you make your mind your friend. So that's pretty cool notion. And yes, that's paradoxical too. But if you want to bring your mind closer to you, you want to befriend it as opposed to fighting it and trying to get away from it all the time. Now, NLP specializes in the art of utilizing language in order to access the brain's neuroplasticity, its ability to do new things, and trigger the creation of new neural pathways to carry these new perceptions. So to befriend your mind for most of us is kind of a new perception. And if you haven't done the work to create a new neural pathway to carry that new perception, then it remains just an idea. In other words, as one of the NLP creators once said, an idea remains just an idea until it sets up housekeeping in your muscles, which it cannot do unless it first has a new neural pathway in the brain to carry it to the muscles. Now, Bruce Lipton, who's a pretty famous guy these days, says that perception can rewire genes. So if you take a close look at this little brain here, you can see that there are bridges that have developed between the right and the left hemisphere. One very orderly and linear, and the other more creative and artistic. So you, in changing your perception of these conflicting guidelines, changes the way your brain reacts when it perceives them. So the fundamental thing you're doing here is working with the way that you relate to these conflicting guidelines and acknowledging the stress that it produces when you're doing it the way you're doing it right now, which is saying, I have to do one of these or the other one. So what about our biology? What do the cells in our body actually have to do with spiritual healing? Because a lot of us just want to get out of the body. We want to transcend it and not pay any attention to it. But in actuality, the cells in our body have a lot to do with spiritual healing. So let's look at why I'm saying that, okay? Our cells, out of which our body is completely made, only have two options. The first option of cells is to be in protection mode. And that means they have to move away from negative signals or toxins, okay? Protection mode. The other option is to be in growth mode, and that means that they're moving toward positive signals or nutrients. Now that's all they can do. They either go towards the positive and be in growth mode, or they go away from the negative and they're in survival mode or protection mode. So the cells operate like an on-off switch. It's either one choice or the other. And that is what impacts you when you look at those conflicting guidelines. Your cells are telling you either they're positive and nourishing or they're negative and toxic. So it finds itself in a dilemma, right? You're in that dilemma, and it's not a fun one either. The new perception is to flow between one and the other, like the flow on a dimmer switch where you can turn the light and make it brighter, or you can make it softer. First one and then the other. So this little guy is singing the notes of being both a human being and then the notes of being a divine being. So instead of trying to be one and get rid of the other, this little guy is now flowing between them, which creates one of the basic spiritual tenets in almost all Eastern paths anyway, and probably some of the traditional Western ones as well. Balance. Balancing is the key. So we want to switch from an on-off switch to being like the flow that occurs on a dimmer. So you go from one guideline and then to the other guideline and then back to the other. That's the new perception. Flowing between these three sets of guidelines, each one having its own place, creates balance for you. It makes your choices clearer. It makes your decisions easier. And it evokes a sense of harmony and calm and inner peace. Pretty nice, huh? So this is what you want to do. NLP can help you change the way you're perceiving those conflicting guidelines so that you are able to flow between them, manifesting one and then manifesting the other, viewing through one and then viewing through its supposed opposite, allowing you to have this balance much more easily, allowing you to be free of the stress of having to make a choice about one or the other. Being able to flow will make the decisions easier about to discriminate which of these two guidelines in each of these three sets is the one that's appropriate, because discrimination is certainly a necessary part of infusing spirituality into your daily life. This also will evoke a sense of harmony and calm and inner peace, because you're taking away the notion that you have to choose, and if you don't choose the right one, something bad could very well happen. Either something will fall apart in your material life, or something will fall apart in your spiritual life. So just to review for you, the human self guidelines are keep moving and go after what you want. Divine, stay still and be grateful for what is. So see if there's a shift in you if you look at these as not contradictory and something you don't have to choose between, but something that you can flow between. First one when it's appropriate and then the other, allowing the two to actually complement each other, which is a very important thing. The second thing, again, as a review, focus on the future and expect to get what you want. Then focus on the present and let things be as they are. So you're moving like a dimmer switch back and forth between the two. Pretty good way to go about it. All right? So then let's look at the next one for you again, just to review. Heal your wounds from the past, and you are perfect as you are. The more that you work with this, the more these two seem reasonable as partners, right? And that's how you start to infuse your spiritual desire and way to live into your daily life. The material and the spiritual here need to be two sides of the coin of daily living, because you have to attend to the responsibilities of being human and also drink of the joys and bliss of being a divine self as well. Okay, so for more information on this, you can visit our website at tohelpyouhelpothers.com. You can email me at Ragini at tohelpyouhelpothers.com. And you can also visit our online educational programs at courses.tohelpyouhelpothers.com. Okay, and that way you can see some of the courses that are there. There's a course there called The Mystic's Wisdom Decoded that relates precisely to what we're talking about here today. Okay, so I'm going to stop this share and come back here like this. Okay, so I hope that was pretty interesting. We went through it pretty quickly, but that's the deal here. If you can utilize your ability to begin to see something differently, and this is ability that we all have, where you do it 1,000 times. We've changed the way we look at hairstyles. We've changed the way that we look at what's stylish and what isn't. Over the years, we change what kind of foods we can eat. Our preferences change. All kinds of things change in relationship to the way we now perceive things or look at them. So you already have a lot of experience at changing the way you see something, changing the way you look at it. So NLP can help you do that more easily. Of course, you can do it on your own. And I'm also giving you, when you go, you'll get an email shortly, which has a link to the download for you, which is some tips on how to use NLP and your spiritual life together in the way that we've talked about. And of course, NLP, what it can help you do is it can help you clarify your questions that you're asking about which one is the right way to go. Because in actuality, they're both right depending on what it is you're attempting to do in the moment. Is it one of your responsibilities and duties as a human being? Or is it one of those times when your real responsibility is to perceive and move out of your spiritual perceptions? Now, I'm not telling you what those are specifically. These things that I gave today are general guidelines that I attempted to cover a core fundamental idea that could be articulated in lots of different ways. So I wanted to let you know that the key thing here that we're talking about using NLP with is to shift away from using an on-off switch, right? I'm human, now I'm divine. I'm human, now I'm divine. I have to choose one. If I choose human too much, then I lose my divinity. If I choose divine too much, then I lose, oh my goodness, what should I do? What should I do? And which is the proper perspective to use in this circumstance? Once you have it installed as a dimmer, you can go back and forth and flow, because that is the goal of most people who want to infuse their daily life with their spiritual perspectives. They want to be able to flow between their responsibilities and duties of being human and also drink of the joy and the stillness of being divine. They feed each other, actually. If you want to live and be happy, we're here, we've got a mind, we've got emotions. So the key here is when you do that, what you end up doing is learning how to befriend your mind. And some of the tips in your handout will tell you specifically how to help you do that just a little bit more precisely. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I've got that. I covered everything that I wanted to cover here today. I hope it was helpful. It was fast, but also, again, I wanted to tell you about Judith. After she understood that these two sets of guidelines, or these three sets of two guidelines apiece, that were seemingly contradictory, after she understood that she could flow between both of them, and we got that installed into her brain as a new neural pathway, her whole relationship to what she had experienced as a very painful dilemma, which was affecting her happiness in her personal life and her success in her professional life, she began to find greater ease and joy at home, and she became more at ease and filled with joy when she was doing her work, because she knew then how to bring her spiritual perspectives with her. She could flow back and forth between the two, and you can look at it this way, or you can look at it this way, flowing up and back down, up and down, whatever your spiritual path guides you to do, you have to get over this mental hump of those guidelines being contradictory. The core thing that causes the problem is the idea that we are both a human being and a divine being. Okay? If you have that belief, if that is what you're striving to do, is allow yourself to transcend your humanity enough to discover your divinity, this is going to be helpful if you put it into practice. Okay, I'm going to check my chat box here and see if anybody has any questions, and I don't see any at all. So if you have any questions or comments, now's the time to put them in that chat box. I'm sitting here looking at it. So I guess the other thing, while I'm waiting, if anybody has a question or a comment, that's fine too. Let me just take a look over here. I guess the thing that I want you to understand is the more that a cell feels like it needs protection, the less it can go into growth mode, right? So, and the mind is definitely designed to perceive any place in your life where you might need protection, where survival could be questioned. So it's very, very geared to staying in protection mode. Whereas your spiritual self is very, very designed for growth mode, right? So when you have both of those going on, you can access and make sure that you have this ability to flow from one protection mode into growth mode, so that you're going back and forth between the two. It reduces your stress, reduces your confusion. It reduces the drive that you have to be something other than what you are right at this moment in time, because those spiritual perspectives say, hey, breathe. It's okay, right? This is the journey. Being both of these, you got to do your human life and you got to do your spiritual life. If you're both of those, if you're both beings, maybe two sides of the same coin, whatever that coin is, life maybe, whatever you want to call it. I don't want to get hung up on language or any particular spiritual perspective, although I think that those three sets pretty much cover some basic notions about how to be spiritually free, and also how to be successful and happy on the material plane. So these two go together like a hand and a glove. All we have to do is learn how to flow between them. When do you put the glove on? When do you take it off? But as long as you're here with a body and a mind, you got to deal with them. And this, I hope, is a better way. So if you have any questions, all you have to do, nothing's come up, so feel free to send them to me if you'd like. And I think that's it. We're going to go from there. I appreciate your presence here today. You'll get an email shortly that has the link to the video replay and also the download, where you'll get tips on using NLP and spiritual healing. Well, I hope this has been of value to you today, and thank you all for coming. Those of you that are here, I appreciate it very much. Those of you that have watched the replay, thank you very much for joining me. And if any of you have any questions, please let me know. Email me at Ragini at tohelpyouhelpothers.com. That's T-O, right? The word tohelpyouhelpothers.com. Okay, my friends, thanks a lot for coming. I appreciate it. And I'm going to say goodbye and stop the recording at this point, and I'll hang out for a moment to say hi to those of you that are still here, if I can figure out how to turn on your videos for you. Okay, take care, and thanks for being here. Bye.